Good afternoon. Today is Tuesday, November 23rd. It is 1 p.m. And this is a meeting of the Committee on Global Opportunities and the Creative Innovative Economy. I understand that state law requires that the following announcement be made at the beginning of every remote public hearing as follows. Due to the current public health emergency, City Council committees are currently meeting remotely. We are using Microsoft Teams to make these remote hearings possible. Instructions for how the public may view and offer public testimony at public hearings of council committees are included in the public hearing notices that are published in the Daily News, Inquirer, and Legal Intelligencer prior to the hearings and can also be found on phlcouncil.com. I now note that the hour has come. Clerk, will you please call the roll to take attendance? Members that are in attendance will please indicate that you are present when your name is called. Also, please say a few words when responding so that your image will be displayed on screen when you speak.
Councilmember Gilmore Richardson.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and colleagues. I'm present.
Good afternoon.
Councilmember Dom.
Council member, you are on mute still.
Oh, good afternoon, Mr. Chair and colleagues. I am present. Sorry about that.
Good afternoon.
Councilmember Thomas.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, colleagues. I'm present.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Councilmember Green. Councilmember Sanchez. Councilmember Squilla. And Chair O.
And I am present. Thank you. Quorum of the committee is present and the hearing is now called to order. This is a public meeting of the Committee on Global Opportunities and the Creative Innovative Economy pertaining to resolution number 210881. At this time, I will ask the clerk to please read the title of the resolution.
Resolution 210881, authorizing the Committee on Global Opportunities and the Creative Innovative Economy to hold hearings to receive the report of the Arts and Culture Task Force formed by the committee, to learn about its findings and the actions thus far taken, and to review the impact of this work on the vital arts and culture sector in the city of Philadelphia.
Thank you. Before we begin to hear testimony from the witnesses we have for today, everyone who has been invited to the meeting to testify should be aware that this public hearing is being recorded. Because the hearing is public, participants and viewers have no reasonable expectation of privacy. By continuing to be in the meeting, you are consenting to being recorded. Additionally, prior to recognizing members for the questions or comments they have for witnesses, I will note for the record at this time that we will use the chat feature available in Microsoft Teams to allow members to signify that they wish to be recognized. In order to comply with the Sunshine Act, the chat feature must only be used for this purpose. Before I ask the clerk to call the first panel, would any of my colleagues like to make an opening statement or comment?
Mr. Chairman, this is Councilmember Thomas. May I be recognized?
Yes, absolutely.
First of all, Mr. Chairman, thank you and your team for putting us in a position to be able to hold such an important conversation. This is something that's really significant as it relates to not just the work of the Arts and Culture Task Force, but the work of the Illuminate the Arts grants. For the first time, we were able to put money directly in the pockets of artists when looking at the conditions that this coronavirus crisis created outside of the death, the pain, the suffering, the inconveniences, the fear, the trauma. We also have the economic issues as well. And one can argue that no one's been hit as hard in the same capacity as the arts and culture community have. So I was excited to vote with my colleagues to be able to put us in a position to create the Illuminate the Arts grants. And I was also excited, not just of the advocacy of the Arts and Culture Task Force, but the level of participation as it relates to the selection process. I think it's really important that we recognize the role of constituents here in the city of Philadelphia, that we recognize the importance of transparency, but also we recognize the importance of public-private partnerships and collaborating with constituents and organizations across the city of Philadelphia so things can be done in a way that's fair, in a way that's just, and in a way that offers some level of transparency. And we think that we accomplished that not just with the distribution of the grants, but also assessing how the grants have been used. So I'm excited to be here today to be a part of this important conversation. I'm excited to listen to other advocacy efforts that have already taken place in the past, as well as things that will be taking place in the future. And I appreciate my colleagues, especially Councilmember Gilmore Richardson, who've been locked in arm with me as it relates to some of the work that we've tried to do on the advocacy. And then I also have to give a huge thank you to council members Squilla, Bass, and Green, who were a part of an effort, an advocacy initiative throughout the course of this fall to be able to provide more funding and more dollars to this sector. So thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the leniency. Thank you to all the witnesses that's here today, and thank you to those who are viewing to listen to this important conversation.
Thank you, Councilmember Thomas. At this time, the chair recognizes Councilmember Catherine Gilmore Richardson for comments.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to echo the sentiments of my colleague, Councilmember Thomas, and thanking all of you, all of our colleagues for this hearing today. I'm looking forward to the testimony and continuing our support for the arts and culture here in the city of Philadelphia. So thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for this hearing, especially this week, and I'm looking forward to hearing from all of the witnesses. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councilmember. For anyone who is not speaking, would you please mute your microphone? That way we will all be able to hear. At this time, I will ask my colleagues if there is anyone else who would like to make a opening comment. There being none, we will proceed. Clerk, will you please call the first panel of witnesses we have to testify for this morning?
The first witness today is Kelly Lee.
Good afternoon. You are connected, and please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Great. And before I get started, can we also make sure that Carrie LeBrand from the Office of Arts and Culture is a presenter as well? We're going to be looking at her PowerPoint presentation. Great. So good afternoon, Chairperson David O. and members of the committee. I'm Kelly Lee. I'm the Chief Cultural Officer for the City of Philadelphia and a Director of the Office of Arts, Culture, and the Creative Economy. I want to thank you for providing me the opportunity to testify regarding Resolution 210881 and for holding this public hearing on the report and work of the Arts and Culture Task Force. The ongoing pandemic has affected all of us, but I echo what Councilman Thomas said, that the arts have been particularly hit hard. And with recent numbers that were shared by the Greater Philadelphia Cultural Alliance reporting that a $2.3 billion total economic loss for the arts and culture sector is the impact in the Philadelphia region. This is just a portion of the impact of the pandemic on the arts, with many individual artists losing their source of revenue for more than a year due to shuttered venues. Formed in October 2020, the Arts and Culture Task Force identified a need for immediate funding for Philadelphia's individual artists, small diverse nonprofits, and arts and culture focused businesses. As a result of these findings and the advocacy of council members Isaiah Thomas and Catherine Gilmore Richardson, City Council approved a transfer ordinance of $1.3 million for the Office of Arts, Culture, and the Creative Economy. This funding went towards the creation of the Illuminate the Arts grant and funding neighborhood arts programs planned in 2021. The following presentation will review the impact of the Arts and Culture Task Force on the creative economy in Philadelphia through this funding. We welcome questions at the conclusion of this presentation. And with that, Carrie, if you can share your screen and pull up the PowerPoint.
Yep.
Great, thank you. You can go to the second slide. So like I said, the report of the Arts and Culture Task Force basically found that there is an immediate need for additional funding for Philadelphia's individual artists, small diverse nonprofits, and arts and culture focused businesses, many of which lost all of their revenue. Many of these individual artists lost both their day and nighttime jobs all at the same time. Next slide. So as a result, this $1.3 million was transferred to the Office of Arts and Culture. $1 million went towards the Illuminating the Arts grant. $200,000 was targeted for new free neighborhood arts programs and to support OACCE's neighborhood arts programs that were canceled in 2020 due to the pandemic, and $100,000 of this funding went to support the admin costs for the grants and for the additional neighborhood programming. Next slide. So the funds for City Council were provided by the New Normal Budget Act as an investment to address racial disparities in the city of Philadelphia. So these funds were intended to financially uplift Philadelphia's creative sector and support disadvantaged communities, particularly Philadelphia's Black and Brown communities that have been disproportionately impacted by COVID. So OACCE, we aligned our funding with these goals of the New Normal Budget Act by prioritizing individual artists of color, individual artists, small diverse nonprofits, and arts and culture focused businesses located in disadvantaged communities, and artists and arts organizations, cultural programming in disadvantaged communities, and artists and arts organizations serving vulnerable constituencies such as low income, at-risk youth, persons with disabilities and health conditions, incarcerated individuals, and returning citizens. Next slide. You can go straight to slide 6. So this is the timeline of the Illuminating the Arts grant. So in February 23rd of this year, council members Isaiah Thomas and Kathy Gilmore Richardson announced the Illuminating the Arts grants. The whole top line, those are all like administrative milestones. The transfer ordinance of the $1.3 million was signed by the mayor in March 29th, and that's what sort of triggers the release of the funds. The Illuminating the Arts grants were launched in May 4th, and by September 10th, 99% of all of the grants have been distributed to artists and arts organizations and these creative enterprises. That's within 4 months because we really wanted to respond to this sense of urgency. And the only reason why it was 99% instead of 100%, because we had to chase down people who submitted W-9s but didn't sign them, and tracking sort of bad email addresses. But we're very proud of working with the committee to get the money out the door that quickly. Slide 7. So OACCE worked with members of the Arts and Culture Task Force to form the Illuminating the Arts Committee. Our intention was to develop a program that would be easy and accessible to individual artists, small diverse nonprofits, and arts and culture focused businesses who were not sort of traditionally eligible for grants. Like I said before, $1 million was budgeted for these grants. The committee approved a total of $1,002,400 in relief funding to 645 grantees. The additional $2,400 was just supported through OAC's FY21 budget. And I cannot thank enough the members of the task force that served on the Illuminating the Arts Grants Committee that included Sierra Lambert and Raheem Manning. They are both co-chairs of the Arts and Culture Task Force. Terry Fox from the Philadelphia Dance Project, and Ishu from the Asian Arts Initiative, and Christina Vaseo from the Fabric Workshop. The amount of hours and smart thinking that they contributed to the development of this grant was invaluable, and it would not have been successful without their input. Next slide. So again, the grant was created as a COVID relief fund. And we wanted to prioritize funding applicants who demonstrated the greatest need and applicants that represented and served disadvantaged communities. And you'll see that reflected in the stats I'm about to share. The committee wanted to create an easy process that had a low bar of proof of creative practice. And we specifically wanted to make it easy to attract those new grantees and arts organizations that had a limited capacity or experience in applying for grants. And again, we specifically targeted individual artists and small, diverse nonprofits. The committee prioritized applicants in disadvantaged communities by focusing on those located in 24 high poverty zip codes that were identified through the 2018 census data. And most importantly, we really focus on responding to this sense of urgency and getting the money out the door as quickly as possible. And again, announcing on May 4th and getting the majority of the money out the door by September 10th. Next slide. In total, we received 949 applications that were submitted that were requesting 4.8 million in relief funding. 906 of those applicants were eligible. Those folks who were ineligible was because they were not in Philadelphia, or they the practice that the work that they did in their nonprofit or for-profit work was not considered in the creative sector. Like a tarot card reader is one that comes to mind. 71% or 645 applicants received grant funding. 62% of the awardees reside in these priority high poverty zip codes, and the grantees represent a diverse set of creative practices, as you can read here, from music to theater to film to public art and many more. And you can go to creativephl.org to see the full list of grant awardees. Next slide. So this is the breakdown by category of the 645 total grantees. 590 individual artists, all with incomes of $60,000 or less, received a $1,000 grant. We funded 100% of all of the individual artists that were eligible because this was our target, because these were the folks that were falling through the cracks of more traditional forms of funding. We supported 30 small nonprofit arts organizations that had budgets of under $100,000, and they received grants between $5,000 and $6,800. Between $5,000 and $6,800 per organization. We supported 10 mid-sized nonprofit arts organizations with budgets between $100,000 and $500,000. They each received a $10,000 grant for a total of $100,000. And we supported 15 small creative enterprises that were awarded grants totaling $112,000. And they received grants between $2,500 and $8,000, and their operating budgets were $500,000 or less. So we really narrowed down the size of the budget, again, to really sort of ensure that we were finding the small nonprofits and the small creative enterprises. Next slide. So some facts about the individual artists, and please read we have some great quotes of some of our grantees. So for individual artists, again, there was a $600,000 cap on income. And even though that was our cap, of the 100% of the eligible individual artists that applied and received an award, 75% of them reported an income of less than $33,000 in 2020. So again, our target was to reach those individual artists that were in greatest need. And this shows the fact that the average salary was $33,000, showed that that was the case. 60% of the awardees of the individual artists reside in priority high poverty communities. 55.1% went to artists of color. 78% did not receive any other COVID-19 relief funds from the city. 33% of the individual artists reported that this was their first grants, and this had a lot to do with the outreach that was done by the Arts and Culture Task Force. We really tried to reach those individuals that did not think that they were eligible for a grant, these first-time grantees. And 55% used their funds primarily to support their creative practice. Next slide. So some facts about the small nonprofit arts organizations, again, with budgets under $100,000 or less. So 83% of these nonprofits were located in priority disadvantaged communities. 40% had 1 month of cash on hand. So this shows that some of these organizations that received a grant were on the verge of closing without this grant with 1 month of cash on hand. 50% serve low-income individuals or families or at-risk youth. 71% did not receive any other COVID-19 relief funds. 33% were first-time arts grant recipients, and 48% used the funds for program expenses. Next slide. For the mid-sized arts organizations, and again, these are organizations with budgets between $100,000 and $500,000 a year. 90% of these were based in priority, high poverty, disadvantaged communities. 77.7% had a drop in employment in 2020. This mid-sized nonprofit organizations had this largest drop in employment. 80% of the grantees served low-income individuals or families or at-risk youth. 80% did not receive any other COVID-19 relief funds from the city. 20% were first-time arts grants recipients, and 60% used the funds for program expenses. One of the other things that's interesting about the mid-sized arts organizations was that 10% had 1 month of cash on hand, compared to 40% of the small. So that shows that the small arts organizations were really less stable than the mid-sized organizations, not by much, but at least some of the mid-sized organizations had more than 1 month's cash on hand. Next slide. Some facts about the small creative enterprises. So these had operating budgets of $500,000 or less. Again, 80% based in priority disadvantaged communities. 78% did not receive any other COVID-19 relief funds from the city. And we thought that that was very interesting just because these were for-profit businesses and many of them were eligible for other COVID-19 relief funds that were being distributed through commerce and other sources, but maybe it's just awareness that 78% did not receive, even though most of them would have been eligible. 56% reported that this was their first arts grant. 44% used the funds on program expenses. 35% loss in employment from 2019 to 2020. And these folks had the greatest loss of revenue with a loss of 64.6% in revenue between 2019 and 2020. And, you know, this quote from this small creative business was very impactful. It's one of the first ones we received. And again, the fact that they could not get any sort of the PPP money, this was like just-in-time funds that City Council put into the hands of artists and arts organizations in these small creative businesses. Next slide. Go straight to slide 16. So like I said, $200,000 went to support neighborhood arts programs. And for this program, we funded artists and arts organizations to provide free cultural programming in neighborhoods and communities. And for us, we're not only are we supporting artists and arts organizations, but we are providing access to quality arts programs throughout Philadelphia's communities and to ensure that it is equitable throughout Philadelphia. Slide 17. So $200,000, like I said, was budgeted for this. Since June of 2020, $144,467 has been budgeted in funding to support 146 new neighborhood arts programs in 2021. So these are programs that would not have happened without this funding. A total of $67,932 was distributed to 61 artists and cultural organizations that OACCE had to cancel in 2020 due to the pandemic. So again, understanding the sense of urgency, the fact that some of this money could be used to pay those artists whose programs were canceled was very, very important. Next slide. So this is just a breakdown of the different types of neighborhood performances. The average amount per program was $989. We had about 21,000 estimated in attendance at our neighborhood arts programs. And we know that our median attendance was about 60 people. But we had a few sort of large scale events that we supported that attracted hundreds of people, including the Northeast International Festival. We supported with this program the Sister Soul series at Spruce Street Harbor, a Weirdo Festival in East Kensington, the Lifeline Jazz Festival, the Mill Creek Community Partnership Festival. So these are examples of events that attracted a few hundred people, which really, one, it's great that we provided access to that many people, but that's what led to such a very high and positive attendance numbers. Next slide, 19. So through the neighborhood arts programs, 895 artists were paid. You can see the breakdown of women, men, non-binary, and agender artists. 61.7% were artists of color. 60% of these events were in priority, high poverty, disadvantaged communities. And for the breakdown of the events that we supported that were canceled in 2020, that's the 67,932, that supported 64 artists, and 49% of the artists are located in these priority, high poverty, disadvantaged communities. Next slide. So thank you for the opportunity to give this presentation. I hope that, with some of this data that we sort of demonstrated with the help of the Arts and Culture Task Force, that the dollars went quickly to the targeted recipients. And just from, the testimonials that we've received, this was really just-in-time funding for a lot of these artists and arts organizations. And I just very much appreciate City Council's support and the advocacy specifically of Isaiah Thomas and Catherine Gilmore Richardson for this $1.3 million. And, we stand ready and able to do it again. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. I'm just going to note that we have been joined by Councilmember Mark Squilla, a member of this committee. And now I'd like to recognize Councilmember Isaiah Thomas for questions and comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate it. And I first want to say thank you to Kelly and her entire team. As somebody who works in city government, I know often that it's the folks that's behind the scene who never testifies in hearings like this that has to assume a huge bulk of the work. So Kelly, I know you and your team did a phenomenal effort as it relates to not just the level of accuracy as it relates to the intention of what we wanted to do, but also that detailed report. I think that it's important for us to be able to have data and information about how money was spent, how tax dollars were dispersed, and most importantly, the impact that those dollars have not just on the people that they were spent, but on us as an entire city. So thank you for that phenomenal report and that information and all your hard work. Just a couple questions real quick. So if I understand correctly, there was a significant number of events that we were able to support. Do we have an idea of how those events were successfully able to attract people to come to Philadelphia? I think that when we think about our recovery effort and what we need to do to get our economy in a way where we see fit, my colleague, Councilmember Dom, held a hearing earlier around the fiscal stability of the city, and there is a possibility that we can face a couple $100 million deficit if we don't do everything right. So I'm wondering, when we do invest in initiatives like this, what does it mean, and what is the impact that it has as it relates to attracting people to Philadelphia and encouraging people to enjoy our city?
That's a really good question. First of all, we attend our events and we survey attendees at our events, and we also ask the artists that we pay to fill out a little report. We do not ask the question from attendees whether or not they're from Philadelphia or whether or not they're from outside of Philadelphia. One of the things that we do know just from some of the testimonials from the arts organizations that we supported for the neighborhood arts programs, that they were thrilled, but they were able to attract new people to their communities. We know that the people who attended some of these events were not from that particular community where that neighborhood arts that neighborhood arts program took place, but we don't know if those people were from outside of the city of Philadelphia. But that's a type of question that we can add to our surveys because it is critically important. First of all, these attracting visitors to our neighborhoods is just, going to give them a reason to come back. I mean, we have a very exciting downtown, but our neighborhoods have some amazing sort of assets to offer as well. And so I think that we would be doing a service and doing a great thing if we started to gather that information and then also try to do something to attract more visitors from outside of the city of Philadelphia to some of our neighborhood arts programs.
So if we were to provide another round of Illuminate the Arts grants, number one, I guess I'm asking, would this be able to be a priority as far as reviewing the data to be able to assess that component? But then I would also ask, what if we were to provide another round, what do you feel like the priority should be as far as based on your expertise and your experience through this process, who should we be focusing on as it relates to who we can provide grants to? What demographic should we focus on if we are trying to help stimulate the economy with events like what I'm talking about right now?
Right. I would say it's like more of the same. I think that, if we had additional funding to be able to support this cross section, I mean, I think our data show that we did support a lot of small and minority artists and organizations that focus on disadvantaged communities, but the quality of the programming was for everyone, right? We were just sort of targeting because those are the folks that fell through the cracks. I think if we can do more, I think that we would need additional funding to really be better at promoting these events. I think the promoting of the events will attract more attendees. I think better promotion of the events will help to lead to outside visitors from people outside of Philadelphia to coming to Philadelphia. Or if they come to Philadelphia for something that is more mainstream, if we are heavily promoting our neighborhood programming, then we can sort of get those folks while they're here to see sort of these other amazing cultural programs that the city has to offer. So I think it's more of the same, but really sort of doing more outreach in order to make sure that more people are aware of this type of programming.
Last question, Mr. Chairman. I apologize for the for the time, for the lengthiness. Um, would that be something your office would have capacity to do, or would you partner with someone else for that type of advertising?
I think that for the marketing and advertising, we'll partner with someone who does that all day, every day, right? I think that there's a lot of great data out there in terms of the radius of where our visitors come from. Whether or not we're partnering with a marketing firm that focuses on hospitality marketing, or someone like Visit Philly that already sort of does a lot of advertising to attract visitors to the city. But we would definitely partner with someone who would be experts in trying to reach our target audiences.
I would like to see that. I think that that's something that we should make a concentrated effort around. And I think the advocacy is important, the data is important, but I think if we can continue to improve what we're doing, and I think that's one way we can improve is to try to make sure that some of the events and initiatives are marketed in a way that not just encourages Philadelphians to take advantage of these programs and organizations, but then encourages other people to come to our city, to visit our city, to take advantage of these great things, and to, of course, spend their money in our city. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate leniency. And again, thank you, Kelly. Thank you to you and your entire team for the great work you're doing.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Councilmember Thomas, and thank you, Kelly Lee. I'll ask other members of the committee, do you have any questions or comments before we move on to our next panel?
Can I, Councilmember O, this is Mark Squilla. Can I just make one comment?
Yes, absolutely. Councilmember Squilla.
Thank you very much. And Kelly, thank you for your great work and efforts during these challenging times. I mean, it was really important to be able to have access for these smaller groups. And hold on.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Let me again say, if you are not speaking, please mute your microphone. Thank you. Go ahead, Councilmember.
As this resource was made available and we see the outcomes of it and how important it is it something that these groups are now?
But I have to say I agree. I think as the foundation.
I'm sorry, Councilmember. Could you give me a second? I'm sorry. Someone is not muted. Someone is not muted. Please mute your microphone. Thank you. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Councilmember.
All right. Sorry, Kelly.
That's okay.
It's challenging with these virtual calls, but if we, now that these organizations have received this, I see that they would probably need additional resources moving forward, you know, in the upcoming years. Is it something that we think that we can make sustainable in the future? I know we have the Cultural Fund and other organizations that provide it. Is there a way to either combine it into an organization that's already providing some resources, or it's something that we should continue to be able to have for these smaller groups that really need this as an opportunity to stay afloat?
Yeah, you know, I think that there has to be some focus on individual artists and small arts organizations. You know, and I've said what I'm going to say now. I said it directly to Councilman Thomas and Catherine and Councilwoman Catherine Gilmore Richardson. You know, OACCE, we do not care who gets the money to distribute it, as long as it is targeted for those groups. So whether or not it goes to the Philadelphia Cultural Fund and they all of a sudden can change their scope to support individual artists, or they sort of change their process a little bit in order to reach that 33% of individual artists that have never received a grant before, an arts grant before. We are open to work with anyone, but I do think that it has to be intentional, that some entity is focused on this sector, just because there's just a huge gap to make up. And like I said, a lot of them are not eligible for more traditional sources of funding. And so when COVID hit, our office worked with the Philadelphia Cultural Fund and with the Greater Philadelphia Cultural Alliance to do the COVID Arts Aid Fund. And then a lot of our foundations also pivoted to give money to sort of arts organizations, and everyone was trying to be helpful. But if you look at the arts organizations that received that funding, many of them were already being funded by those foundations. And so, you know, for them, they wanted to prop up their investment, right? If they've been supporting these larger arts organizations for a long period of time, they wanted to make sure that they could survive COVID. And that's good. And we are very grateful that they did that. But if you were never eligible for that funding and you were a small gig worker and you were not quite eligible for the pandemic unemployment relief because the state never really figured out how to get them their relief. It was just like a technical glitch, so it took them a long time. These folks went for long periods of time with no revenue and no source of revenue. So again, I think it's important. It's not important who does it, but it's important that it's done, that there is some entity that really sort of focuses on individual artists, supporting and sustaining them and helping them to grow, and small arts organizations supporting and helping them, and sustaining them and helping them to grow, because that will make them eligible for more traditional types of funding.
Yeah, and I see this as an opportunity, obviously, because those folks also drives the economic impact for the city of Philadelphia. So, it's different requirements by different organizations, and I don't think the city minds if there's different organizations running these things, as long as we're reaching the folks who need it the most. And I think that is the key. So I really appreciate you spearheading this, and I think it was really important to be able to make folks know that, all art and artists and individuals and small groups all are being considered. And it's not just larger groups or people who have additional resources. So I don't know what the answer is, but I do know that we need to continue looking at ways to try to help all these folks. And so we appreciate it and rely on your guidance, as this moves forward. And I want to thank Councilmember Thomas and Gilmore Richardson, for their leadership on this, because it's really important to keep this moving. And also thank our chair for having these hearings to make sure we all know and are part of the process. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Squilla. Are there any other comments or questions?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Mr.
There
Chair,
is one
this is
more. I'm sorry.
Councilmember.
Yes, you are recognized, Councilmember.
Thank you. This is Councilmember Gilmore Richardson. I just wanted to provide a quick point of information, but before I do that, I wanted to thank Council Member Thomas for all of his work that we've done together to ensure that we have an Illuminate the Arts grant. But I really wanted to thank Kelly Lee and her team. Without the work of her office and their team, we would not have had a mechanism in the city of Philadelphia to support individual artists and small artists during the COVID-19 pandemic. So I wanted to offer my sincere thanks and gratitude to Kelly Lee, her office, and her entire team. I quickly just wanted to notate for the record that we heard initially when we were going around with the Disadvantaged Communities Task Force tour all across the city, we heard from a number of small and individual artists that they were not eligible for some of the other funding sources that were available at the onset of COVID-19. And that was the impetus for ensuring that we could provide a level of funding for those individual artists and the small grant organizations. So I just wanted to add that in for the record. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, colleagues. And thank you very much, Kelly.
Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member. If there are no other questions or comments, I will thank Kelly Lee and her team for joining us, and I will ask the clerk to call the next panel.
The next panel of witnesses is Raheem Manning and Sierra Lambert.
I hope you are connected and ready to proceed. If so, please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony. Just decide among yourselves who's going first.
Raheem, you could go first.
Okay, so I am Raheem Manning, and along with Sierra, we co-chair the Art and Culture Task Force. First, I want to say thank you to Council as a whole, but more specifically, Councilman Isaiah Thomas and Councilmember Gilmore Richardson for giving us the opportunity to be heard. Me and Sierra are going to ping pong this a little bit because we want to hit a couple key points to let you know all the work that the Art and Culture Task Force has done, and then kind of place you guys to where we believe we need to continue the work at to be effective in supporting the community here in Philadelphia. So since its founding, the Art and Culture Task Force, of course, came out of Disadvantaged Communities Task Force. There are talks and some of those conversations that Councilman Gilmore Richardson just referred to. Outside of that, we had a vision when we got the task force together. We put together a vision on what our goal was, and our vision was to find new and innovative ways to better support artists, performers, and curators throughout the city of Philadelphia. Our mission focuses on the initiatives that will occur during and in the recovery of and after the COVID-19 pandemic and how it affected individual artists and small arts organizations in the city of Philadelphia. We met countless amount of times with countless stakeholders in the art and culture community in the city of Philadelphia, those including some of the bigger institutions like the Philadelphia Museum of Art, the Kimmel Center, the Philadelphia Culture Fund, the Philadelphia Cultural Alliance, Visit Philly, and some of the other smaller organizations around the city. We also held 2 town hall meetings with individual artists and kind of local community representatives. We even had past Mayor Wilson Good on one of our public meetings. And so what we basically did was gained a lot of insight on what artists needed specifically at the time and how we, as the task force, can advocate to the city to provide the things that was needed. Some of the things that came out that we heard, even with the Illuminate the Arts grants, Sierra will speak on as well. That's a continuing factor when it comes to supporting the community is one that so many individual artists and for-profit arts organizations do not qualify for traditional city funding. Even when the city of Philadelphia and the state of Pennsylvania, due to the COVID, pandemic, released lots of money into the communities and into businesses, many of those funds had stipulations that excluded small arts organizations or excluded individual artists or individual for-profit artists as well. And some of those stipulations, just to put them out there, one of the big ones was that most city funding released during COVID required a brick and mortar requirement, which lots of creative economies and creative organizations, specifically art and culture organizations, don't usually have a brick and mortar location because they take their creative talents on the road and affect the communities, as they go. And I think that was a really big thing that was a hindrance for a lot of the support that went out from the city. I think the other parts of it is the cumbersomeness of the process when getting grants from the city, and that's even when it's throwing out RFPs as well. The processes for getting or receiving money from the city of Philadelphia in a grant way in a traditional time is very overwhelming for small arts organizations and individual artists who don't have the resources to dedicate the time to a lot of the things that are asked for. And so as our Art and Culture Task Force, we advocated for those things, but the main thing we did to get where we were, and I'll spin it over to Sierra to talk about our diversity and how we got to these answers, is that we listened to the community. We literally were an arm to just listen to the community, which had never been done before. The community here in Philadelphia, the art and culture sector, is very skeptical of a lot of the things that the city of Philadelphia tries to do, because although the intentions are well, no one from the city technically listens to the individual artists, and no one from the city asks the questions that what do individual artists need. It's usually a larger and grander footprint of like, how can we help the sector? And that's why a lot of the funding that comes from the city of Philadelphia, especially through the Cultural Fund or other branches there, go to the same organizations that continually get the grants, as Kelly Lee spoke about previously. So I'll pass it over to Sierra so she can speak a little bit more about the makeup and how we were effective in getting the report done that we submitted. So Sierra.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Thank you, everybody on council, for having me here. Again, special thanks to Council Member Thomas and Councilwoman Gilmore Richardson just for, hearing us out and providing us this opportunity to be able to advocate for ourselves, right? Because that's also a very important part of the conversation. I see you ready to say something. I'm going to.
Please state your name. Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I can't believe I forgot that part. I assume, Raheem introduced me, but that's fine. So hi, everybody. I am co-chair of the Arts and Culture Task Force. My name is Sierra Lambert. So thank you.
Thank you.
So just to piggyback off of a lot of the things that Raheem said, we feel that we were able to effectively reach the community because we really tried to put in a lot of groundwork from the beginning to make that happen, starting with how we selected our members, or just the diversity of the members who are on the actual task force. We were diverse in age range. Our youngest member at the time was 16, which was really important if we wanted to reach the youth artists. That went all the way up. They're also diverse in terms of genres, right? We have, your rappers, your DJs, but we have our dancers, our more traditional painter artists. But we also had people like promoters who work in the art field, and teachers. Just an array of different professions, which I think was very helpful when it came to sorting out the people that we wanted to reach, especially once we got to those Zoom meetings and we were trying to figure out what the issues or what the more immediate issues are. If you get a bunch of artists in one room and you ask what the problems are, there's going to be 500 plus. But you can kind of like group them together if you reach the right amount of people. And the reason why I feel like we were able to do that again is because we started with a very diverse group. So like Raheem had mentioned, we had two Zoom meetings. The first one trying to reach individual artists. The second one just trying to create partnerships with already established arts organizations who may have done this effectively, and those who have not, just trying to get a scope of where we stood. And through that, we prioritized four different things. There was permanence, and that is a lot of the funding is based upon who's in office, what the climate is, all sorts of different things. So whereas other communities have a more permanent stream of funding, we're always at the whim of whatever the situation is. And I'm sure what people should know, if they don't know, is that when these things hurt us, it becomes an exponential problem. Yes, this was something that was put together to address COVID-19, but artists were struggling way before then. So this has just been something that has been compounded. So permanence was one. The second one was individual artists and small organizations. Again, just to repeat some of the things that Raheem has said, a lot of individual artists don't qualify for funding based on criteria. Like he said, whether it's because it's cumbersome or whether, other traditional reasons. There's also a focus on youth and arts. We always talk about, education and what education looks like and what people decide to prioritize for kids. But a lot of our youth is very creative, and unfortunately they don't always feel like they have the avenues to be able to express their art or even sometimes make money off of their art. You turn 16, you want to get a job, you're creative, you might be able to make flyers or promotions or all those other things. So they just aren't always provided the same opportunities. And then, of course, there comes the nightlife or the nighttime economy, which Raheem and I and a couple other members take so personally because that's the sector that we come from, and that has always been important because we have been neglected as a whole. Although I do think that we contribute heavily to the hospitality sector when it comes to bringing money into the city. So those were the four things we decided to focus on. I think that as a team, we've been able to accomplish a lot of things thus far. The number one thing, obviously, is the Illuminate the Arts grants, which we've heard so many people talk about earlier. We were very, very proud of that, especially when it comes to criteria. Criteria is so important, and I can't stress that enough. A lot of the things that our team wants to try to focus on is the criteria of other grants and try to just match like where certain things were missing. A lot of the city, like if you were to evaluate a lot of or who consider themselves an artist, right, to think outside of the box. A DJ is an artist, right? But how many grants are for them? But then you think about the nightlife economy. You think about who goes out to these events, who draws people. I can point to a lot of different DJs, including DJ Active, who draw people from New York just because he's a popular DJ. He's on tour with other people, so people can't wait to come to Philly to see his types of events. And so I'm really happy about the Illuminate the Arts grants because, again, funding individual artists are what's going to bring those types of things to the city. We've also forged relationships, which is really important to us, especially when it comes to youth programming. And we are thankful to everyone on council for that, obviously, but also, some of the organizations we partnered with, like Mural Arts. One of the things that the kids said that they wanted to do was find a way so that they could showcase their art. Sydney, who is on our team, the 16-year-old, thought that it would be a really cool idea to put up a mural that showcases that showcases different youth art using QR codes. So if you walk up to the mural and you place your phone on the QR code, it can pull up some links to youth artists. Also just trying to find relationships and partners with venues, and a lot of that we were able to do just because there was a task force, right? So it opened the door, like using our relationships with Councilman Thomas and Councilwoman Richardson. It just really allowed us to be able to have access to some of the bigger organizations that some of the smaller groups weren't able to do before. Again, allowing us to advocate for ourselves. And then obviously, we're looking forward to the creation of the nighttime economy. Like, so getting that off the ground is a huge success for us. Even having people converse about it is a big deal for us, because this is a conversation that I'm sure Mike might talk about a little bit later. This is something that us in the nightlife sector have been advocating and fighting for over 15 years. So we are super excited about that. And now I'm going to pass it back to Raheem. We're going to again split it up best about next steps, or where we hope to go next. So pass it back to you, Raheem.
All right. Thank you, Sierra. So, again, we've already put in a lot of work, right? And I'm really proud that we did present to City Council and to the Mayor's office, and as well as to the community as a whole, a 62-page report that really summarized all of our findings, right? And in the 3 months that we had to create that report, of course, we could not address all the issues with the sector. However, we did our best to make sure that the issues we did address and the solutions we came up with were steeped in research and also based on what the community needed. So that report has been published, and I will also drop a copy, a link to that report in the chat for anyone who has not viewed that. And we hope that you guys do look at that to guide some of your policy decisions when it comes to the sector, because the community put a lot of just a lot of work into that report. Not only the task force, but the task force had subcommittees of people from the community who committed and supported us when coming together with this report. So the next steps for the sector, and there's a couple of calls that you guys have probably heard, but what we want to do is to make sure that as this COVID-19 pandemic phases out, and you guys have shown some support for the art and culture community, and you have some trust in the art and culture community, largely in part to the members of the Art and Culture Task Force. Again, we know that the community has a lot of just distrust for the city and how it shows up for it. And so at this time where you have this advocacy, you have the Art and Culture Task Force kind of representing what can be done for the community, we want to make sure that we keep a permanence in thinking about it. And not only permanent in funding, but also permanent in having someone or some group advocating for individual artists, minority arts organizations, and for-profit arts organizations. Of course, we have the Office of Nighttime Economy. That position is dope, but we want to make sure that we are expanding and supporting that position, and I'll hold on that because we do have someone speaking to that. Simplifying the RFP process for individual artists. I know a lot of times when the RFP goes out for whatever city project, it's a standard form that's for organizations and for individual artists. But if I'm a smart artist that wants to come and utilize my talents for something the city is asking for, I think the process should be simplified so that you can reach more of those people. And then also, I really want to emphasize before I toss it back to Sierra, because this point hits really home for me, and I know Councilman Isaiah Thomas and Councilman Gilmore Richardson has heard me speak about this all the time, but making sure that we are advocating and providing support for non-traditional businesses in Philadelphia. And when I mean like creative businesses that don't have brick and mortar, but that are also providing to the economy here. A lot of businesses that are being created, whether they're tech startups, whether they're service-based business, whether they're different clothing lines, I think that sort of have such a large digital footprint that they do not need a brick and mortar store, and those businesses should not be forgot about. So those are just some of the things. Of course, the report has a lot more. I'll toss it over to Sierra. She has some important ones as well, as far as steps to move forward.
Yeah, so the other couple things that I want our team to focus on this year is one, how in what other ways artists can be useful to other sectors, right? Whether that's education, whether that's street department, whether that's just looking at artists as solution based, right? Not to other things that are going on to the city, because I feel like we can accommodate a lot of different things that aren't directly related to what people would consider traditional arts initiatives. Also, I want us to continue to build a relationship with different organizations for our youth, specifically. So continuing to build those relationships so that we can get more kids different after school programming to keep them, busy, obviously, and off the streets, but also to make sure that they are able to find different types of post-secondary education that might not be traditional, right? That might be in the arts sector. And and then also again, back to piggyback off of what Raheem said, finding a way to make this situation permanent, especially when we think about the Illuminate the Arts grants, because yes, it's not just about individual artists, but again, it's about criteria and the people who get to decide the criteria. The climate of the individual or the climate of the artists in Philadelphia is so different and so vast. If you have the same people, right, always trying to decide what the criteria of something is, okay, and those people aren't a direct reflection of the artists who live here, the amount of new artists that are able to apply for things or feel like they're eligible for things are always affected by that. So yes, I do agree that we should continue to do this, but we should continue to make sure that the people who are part of the decision process are people who are artists in the community who don't necessarily have any other ties to other things. That's my personal opinion. I'm sorry. Thank you, everybody else, for having us. We really appreciate being able to present today.
And again, just another big thanks to Councilman Isaiah Thomas and Gilmore Richardson for giving us a voice to advocate for the community, and we appreciate the whole council.
All right. Thank you very much. At this time, the chair recognizes Councilmember Isaiah Thomas for questions or comments.
Well, I was going to ask a question, but I think they answered it. I was just going to basically ask about next steps and priorities for the task force moving forward, but I think they kind of addressed that in the midst of their testimony. So I just want to say thank you to the chairs and the other members of the task force for providing such valuable content throughout the course of this entire process, as well as their advocacy over the last year plus, because it's very important that we understand what's going on in the arts and culture space with individual artists and with folks that we aren't touching. So I appreciate the work that's been done, and I'm looking forward to continuing to do the good work that we all know we need to do as a city and as a council body to continue to support this sector. So thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate it, and thank you both for your testimony.
All right. Thank you, Councilmember Isaiah Thomas, and thank you to Raheem Manning and Sierra Lambert. Does anyone else on the committee have a question or a comment? Seeing none, I will ask the clerk to call the next panel.
The next panel of witnesses is Mr. Man Frisbee and Ray Bacoli.
I will say that I think we lost a witness during this time. Is that correct, clerk?
That's correct. Yes, one of the witnesses had to drop off. So just two on the panel.
So my apologies, but we now have two witnesses on the next panel. And just for the viewing public, we have one more panel after this of two witnesses. So let's proceed. We have our next two witnesses on panel 3. Again, just a reminder for anyone who may have forgotten to mute your microphone if you are not speaking so that we don't pick up any extra static or noise while our witnesses are speaking. So I'll start with Mr. Man Frisbee. If you would state your name, identify yourself, and proceed with your testimony. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for having me. First off, I know some of you I don't. My name is Mr. Man Frisbee. I'm an author, filmmaker, and event producer, born and raised in South Philly. For the last 8.5 years, I've been the host and director of Mr. Man's Jam Session. It's a live music experience that features the best singers and musicians in Philly that they have to offer, hands down. So since November of 2019, we've had a residency at City Winery at 10th and Filbert. So the Office of Arts, Culture, and the Creative Economy has been a blessing, I can't even say, for so many reasons. This past summer, I received one of the $1,000 grants, and because I was greatly affected by COVID, as so many artists and hosts and producers were in the city. So this was impactful because I was able to hire a local videographer to record our City Winery Jam Session on July 25th. We packaged it down to an hour and provided the footage to OACCE for airing on the Comcast City Hall channel. So this was purposeful for us because it not only allowed the talents of my DJs, singers, musicians to be on display, but we will be able to use the footage moving forward to promote the band and bring in more opportunities for more than a dozen artists involved in this endeavor. Now, after going through such a crazy 2 years, it's important that people are able to enjoy that kind of soulful stage show that entertains and lifts spirits in Philly. I think we all can agree to that. So I'm also a filmmaker. The Philadelphia Glow is a 19-minute sci-fi short film that was shot on location in Philly and is now available on Amazon Prime. So starting next week, I'll kick off the Philadelphia Glow School Tour, where I will screen the film for high school students and discuss filmmaking and overall careers in writing. I'm also a former Philadelphia Daily News reporter, and I've written 4 books, 2 short stories that made the Amazon bestsellers list. So most recently, like getting this $2,500 grant has allowed me to go to 5 high schools immediately in December at no cost to the high schools. And that's a passion to myself, writing. I went to Overbrook High School, graduated, went to Penn State, wanted to be a journalist, wanted to be an author. So these are the things that I feel are important to share with the young scholars coming up through the Philadelphia School District. So what I love most about this experience was that the application process was so simple. I can't stress that enough. The staff was very professional and encouraging from the very beginning, especially Carrie LeBrand and Teddy Panaman. Panaman, I pronounced it right? Panaman have been especially helpful during this process. And that really matters when the arts have been put on halt because of COVID. It really, really meant the world that everybody was so professional and that the process was easy to follow. So in closing, I just want to thank everybody at OACCE for providing real financial resources that have positively impacted so many people. Just coming through me is going to impact so many people. I can't wait to spread the word to other artists if this continues into 2022, because this is a big deal and it was very helpful. And I appreciate the time.
Thank you very much. I'll ask Ray Bicoli to please state your name, identify yourself, and provide us with your testimony. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me. I'm here with headphones because of the home environment, and
we can hear you.
All right, great. My name is Ray Bicoli, and I am the music director of the Elegance String Quartet. We're a local ensemble. We're based in Philadelphia, primarily in South Philadelphia. We also have an office there at 11th Snyder. So that's what we call our home. And I have been with the group for about 11 years. And our main sort of mission as a musical ensemble is we provide music that is not your everyday sort of things that you hear out there. So from rock and pop and things like that. Everything we do it on our violins and cellos, which is something that is not accessible to every community in Philadelphia. All that sometimes is put in concert halls and venues that are not so open to everybody to attend. So we take that experience and we bring it out to the general public in the forms of concerts, whether in the park. We do a lot of neighborhood concerts, and that's sort of have been our thing over the last few years. And during the pandemic, I'll just say that when everything shut down, it's kind of like very personal to us. Of course, all the musicians have been affected, but when everything was shut down and you're stuck there with nothing to do, pretty much, with a lot of people doing Zoom concerts, we just decided to go out there and start performing, obviously in wherever we were allowed and in a safe way. But we just started performing in different neighborhoods and just to bring people out in their porches, different parks. Clark Park, we've done concerts. Steven Gerrard, and we've done a lot of them at Mifflin Square Park. And I'm sure you're familiar with that area and the CMAC organization there. We partner with them to do a lot of community concerts and to bring like our kind of music for string quartets and violins and all that to an area that probably does not see that happen every day. And we started this back last year. We did it throughout the summer. We never like really asked for anything. We just wanted to do it as musicians, and then we continue it this year. So when the grant came in and we applied for it, it was a little bit like I can't even describe the feeling of what that feels like to get validated for all the like 2 years of work that you already did pretty much, and the rest of the the work that we had already planned for the rest of the summer. So I can't say thank you enough to that grant. I mean, it made everything like everything that we started just like a dream, sort of, just like a project, side project, because we wanted to play and share our music, and there was nothing else to do. And to get validated and recognized like that, it really means a lot. And I speak on behalf of everybody that I work with, and I have about 10 employees or musicians out, colleagues that are really close, that are like family to me, that I play with all the time. And I speak on their behalf that really meant a lot. And to be able to share our music while at the same time, being able to make a living, like that's the greatest gift that we can like receive. So I really want to thank the council members, and of course the Illuminate the Arts grant and everybody that is involved in those decisions for bringing this together for us. And that's all I have. So thank you so much, sincerely.
All right. Thank you very much. I will note that the chat feature is to be used by members to signify if they have comments or questions. I do see that one of our witnesses does have a comment. Let me first ask if any member of the committee has a question or a comment. Not seeing any. Let me recognize Kelly Lee for a comment.
Great, thank you. I just wanted to point out sort of one of the impacts of the Illuminating the Arts grants that was exhibited from our two witnesses. One is that because we were able to reach new artists and arts organizations through the Illuminating the Arts grant, we then had them on our list. So when we did our call for artists for our neighborhood arts programs, they were able to apply and get funding. So Mr. Man Frisbee, he received an ITAG grant, and then he was able to participate in a neighborhood arts program. And then sort of something that was illustrated with Ray from the Elegant String Quartet is that, he received an ITAG grant, but then he was able to do community programming, so just sort of the ripple effect of this funding. And one of the things that I know with the committee members from the Arts and Culture Task Force that we were really hoping is that, we hope that ITAG was sort of the first grant for some of these artists and arts organizations that sort of give them the experience to try to go for other grants. And so, if we're a gateway to that, then that's another great outcome of the Illuminating the Arts grant. And again, just sort of thank you to all of City Council for that $1.3 million and for the Arts and Culture Task Force, that without your boots on the ground listening, none of this would have been possible. So that was my final comment, and thank you, Councilman O.
All right, thank you very much. At this time, I will ask the clerk to call our final panel.
The final panel is Michael Fickman and Ann Ishii.
All right, will you please state your name to identify yourself and proceed with your testimony? Let me start with Ann Ishii, and then we'll go to Michael Fishman.
Hi, everybody. This is Ann Ishii. Thank you for having me, and I'm really excited to share some of the findings from my subcommittee in the Arts and Culture Task Force, which is the capacity in which I'm here giving testimony. So in our cohort, including Raheem and Sierra, whom we just heard from, and Terry Fox, and Christina Vassallo, formed the Permanence Committee, I apologize, I'm forgetting Michelle Kurika and Ebony Zamani. So as a subcommittee, we were responsible with creating a report on this aspect of permanence. And quite frankly, this was in response to a crisis of faith in the arts and culture sector vis-a-vis the city having initially eliminated the arts funding And so what that kind of caused was this huge question of why should we give back when we're not being supported? And so at this juncture, I cannot overstate the gratitude we feel. I think I speak pretty safely on behalf of my colleagues for Councilman Thomas and Councilperson Catherine Gilmore Richardson for their leading this initiative. I want to just point out that this grant, again, so important, and as Kelly has pointed out, really vital to bringing in new voices and making sure that those sort of undervisibilized communities are being acknowledged. But also, just from a sector point of view, big picture, this actually clued us in as institutional community leaders as to how to make an impact inside the city and vice versa. So how are we going to be heard as an arts sector? And as Sierra pointed out, just so that it's acknowledged, we have a worthy voice in other conversations around civic resource building and community building. So we continue actually to meet candidly and offline. So this has sparked a conversation, I think, a really important dialogue between city leaders and community advocates and artists. It's work that all of us, I think, as civil servants will continue to do, and I'm including artists and cultural producers in this context. We're going to do it anyway, so we may as well do it together. And if there's anything artists are really good at, it's to ask really difficult questions and hopefully to entertain you. And in the city of Philadelphia, we entertain you with really difficult questions. So that's been a really, really invaluable part of this process. I hope we get to maintain that dialogue. And I really appreciate the openness of City Council and the various advocacy groups in the city, including the Cultural Fund and the Cultural Alliance. I think that's most of my comments. Just yes to the grant. Let's keep doing it. We'll keep working on making it a better grant. Everything always has room for improvement, right? And that I hope we keep this channel open between the arts and culture leaders of our city, including small business owners and independent artists, as well as the nonprofits and you all in City Council and the Mayor's office.
All right, thank you very much. I believe Michael Fitchman is next. Would you please state your name, hopefully correctly if I did it incorrectly, and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Council Member. Yes, my name is Michael Fitchman, and you did pronounce that correctly. I appreciate that. Good afternoon to Councilmember O and members of City Council, and thanks for allowing me to speak with you today. Thank you to Councilmember Thomas for inviting me to participate on the Arts and Culture Task Force. So I am the chair of the Nightlife Subcommittee of the Task Force. Raheem Manning and Evan Burton were also on the subcommittee with me. I want to report on our work over the last year, which is ongoing, and I want to discuss some future steps to build on the work, including some talk about the Nighttime Economy Office. So I've been a DJ, a music producer, and event promoter in Philadelphia for 20 years. I've toured the world playing music, and I've seen the way things work in other cities. I'm also a city planner and a lecturer at the University of Pennsylvania's Weitzman School of Design. And a lot of my work that I do professionally is with nighttime cities and arts and culture communities all over the world, Asia, Europe, the Middle East, and Africa, and here in Philadelphia with a group called 24 Hour PHL, which is a nightlife community organization. And so I've been an editor of a multinational project called the Global Nighttime Recovery Plan, which has brought together advocates and government officers from all over the globe to help nightlife communities get through and recover from the pandemic. And I really think that the work that we did here in Philadelphia represents a lot of the best of what was kind of crowdsourced from every corner of the globe in that process. And I'm really proud of how cutting edge the work we did is, and I think that we are leaps and bounds ahead in thinking. Actually, it was a huge leap from where we are, where I think we were behind in the past, and now we're thinking about things in a whole new way. So this is a hearing about arts and culture. Why are we discussing nightlife? I think Ciara touched on this. Nightlife is when a lot of creative art and commerce happens, music, theater, dance, happen in creative spaces that are parts of neighborhoods, they're parts of districts, and it happens at a time when some people need to sleep. And so this has been an environment where there's always been some mistrust, dysfunction, a civic culture of no. Art spaces go out of business really often. The workers are really precarious, as we've been talking about today. Equity is very elusive, and we've seen that fully during the pandemic. It's really put a magnifying glass on a lot of these problems. But nightlife and arts and culture are a place where pretty much anybody can get put on. You can hustle, you can make it, and so there are huge opportunities here for lots of people if we give them the framework. So we learned that based on examples worldwide, good governance and planning, stakeholder engagement, and good policies can make for a safer, more vibrant, more inclusive nighttime city. Philadelphia needs this to retain talent. Some survey research by 24 Hour Philadelphia showed that half of our city's artists have considered moving elsewhere, and that was before the pandemic. We need creative activities and communities to offer opportunities and good quality of life for residents. Councilmember Thomas was mentioning people coming from outside the city to spend money here. And it's the reason that we put nightlife on the task force agenda. It's the reason that we proposed, and we're very grateful that council funded the creation of Nighttime Economy Office in the Commerce Department. That's a big first step to bring us in line with cities such as New York, DC, London, Berlin, Pittsburgh, who have such offices. So we're in the game now. But most importantly, it creates a governance framework, an accountability structure, and a public commitment to nighttime businesses and communities and to artists. And so that means there's a path for deliberate policy and programming. And the office, as I said, is a first step. So what's next? First, commerce, and this is one of the things that we're staying on top of on task force. Commerce needs to hire a talented, charismatic, trusted person to lead this office. Some people call this job the quote-unquote nighttime mayor. I mean, it's not really a mayor's job, but that term gives you an idea of the charisma and accountability people expect from this position in other cities. And that I've been in communication with Councilmember Thomas and executive officers at Commerce to ensure the position is scoped correctly, the officer is paid sufficiently, and that will let us attract the right talent and give this person the stature and the support that they need to make change and be, sort of the vessel for the good governance that we were talking about. I'm really grateful to the folks at Commerce, Director Rashid, Deputy Director Somerville, and also to Sophie Heng, who's the Creative Economy Development Manager, for their great work on this. Thanks also to Councilmember Thomas's staff. So we met alongside folks at Commerce with peer officers from San Francisco, Pittsburgh, and Seattle, try to lay the groundwork for the office to succeed. And I think if it's correctly fostered and funded and empowered, it's one of the best designed offices of its kind. But it needs support. So this is both financial and political to build for the future. So the office should be able to conduct an engagement blitz to establish stakeholder relationships. A lot of this is really at its core is about negotiations between communities and businesses, connecting businesses to services with, say, L&I, within commerce, revenue, easing pain points of small business services. And the office should build towards creating a well-resourced plan for nighttime industries and communicates. There needs to be a vision. We should be looking at Atlanta, Nashville, Austin, other music cities in the U.S. We should be passing them in that hierarchy. There's no reason we can't do it. I mean, Philadelphia is one of the great cities in this country, has made amazing musical contributions to the world, and it should all be happening right here. So we should also be coordinating with our neighbors in Pittsburgh on state issues related to Liquor Control Board, on council members on issues that affect your districts, where there are mixed-use areas with nighttime business interests. Please work with this office so that we can use best practices in management to create and maintain, vibrant districts, right, where there are good relationships between neighbors and establishments, and it's very harmonious in terms of trying to get arts and culture at various times of day, working smoothly in the city and not having this kind of conflict-based dialogue and these conflict-based relationships that have characterized us for years. So this office serves as a focal point for business services, engagement, public safety, and those issues for the industry, for workers, for artists, public stakeholders. There are a particular set of regulation and safety and cultural issues in nighttime industries, so it's really important to establish trust and dialogue and give a voice to nighttime interests in the public and administrative process. So there's a licensing or zoning thing, a lighting and streets thing, the streeteries discussion that happened last week. There's a nighttime component to that, and that's something that this office can be a part of. So what's next for the task force aside from the nighttime office? And what did we talk about? I'll just briefly kind of run a few things down so as not to be long-winded. It's all in the report. The task force recommended that council look closely at reforming licensing associated with creative spaces. I sat down once with former Commissioner Perry of L&I with 24 Hour Philadelphia, and we agreed that music is almost functionally illegal in Philadelphia. It's incredibly expensive and complex and illegal by many zoning categories, except in a small handful of districts, to create a space for creative art and performance without getting a risky or expensive variance. It's very hard to run it in a competitive real estate environment. That cost and risk is a high barrier to entry. It discourages investments in programming. Programming is key to being a great art in Music City. It's key to the relationship between patrons and the venues that fosters good behavior. It's key to putting on talent. But that cost also keeps management and ownership from looking like a cross-section of Philadelphia, keeps many would-be operators out. And if the management and ownership don't look like Philadelphia, there's going to be a gatekeeping effect that means the people who get on stage don't necessarily look like the people of Philadelphia. So special assembly licenses should be more broadly available, and there should be ways to increase flexibility with licensing and decrease costs. In the interest of time, I'll just mention a couple other things that are in our report that you can check out. So we suggest council use its power to promote uses of land for creative industries because it's power in development processes. It can use its power to help plan public space for nighttime use, like I'd mentioned with the streeteries, but this extends to other public spaces in terms of how they're lit and their safety components there. Council can promote harm reduction programs with the city's women's health and drug treatment partners and the city's rape crisis treatment center. That works well for venues and also in nighttime spaces in public. And changes in last call closing times have also been something that council members have brought up, as well as state representatives. And there's a governance framework in place now that can help support that. So you can look at the written report for more on those recommendations. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for the support of our work on the task force and for our arts community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, at this time, I'm going to ask council members of the committee if you have any questions or comments.
Mr. Chair.
Yes. Chair recognizes Council Member Isaiah Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I actually don't have any questions. I just want to say thank you for the great information that's being provided, as well as the advocacy. It's been a pleasure to work with Mike. I appreciate the testimony of all of the witnesses who came today. We all know we have great work left to do. Councilmember, I do want to thank you again, as well as your team, for putting us in a position to be able to have this important conversation, especially on a week like this. I can only imagine how difficult it was for you and your team to put us in a position to have such a quick turnaround to be able to have this conversation before the end of the year. So we appreciate you all, and we just want to wish everybody a happy holiday.
Thank you very much, Council Member. Thanking you and Council Member Catherine Gilmore Richardson for your great work, and your co-chairs and your committee, and Kelly Lee and everyone involved in this innovative approach to expanding arts and culture here in Philadelphia. Let me just note that we did receive written testimony from Michael Rashid, our Commerce Director. And with that, I will just ask if anyone else present at this hearing who would like to testify, who I had failed to call, or who wishes to offer any type of testimony. Clerk, would you alert me if there's any such persons?
I don't believe there are.
All right, thank you very much. Hearing none, I want to thank all the panelists, the witnesses for your participation, the council members, everyone who took time today to join us before Thanksgiving for this important hearing and to hear the testimony and to ensure it's televised and made known to the public. This concludes the business before this committee on global opportunities and the creative innovative economy. This hearing is recessed to the call of the chair. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day and a happy Thanksgiving.
Thank